Family and fellow soldiers, I'm Professor, and this is the moment of truth. Jussie Smollett stands accused of making false statements to the police. Not a murder, not rape, not assault, not kidnapping, hell, not even a traffic violation, not even jaywalking, but making a false report to the police. But you wouldn't know it by the way the white media and the thugs with badges are acting. You'd think that he murdered 10 people on the front lawn of the White House. The Chicago PD, specifically their union, is the one behind all this. They took a major L with the 2018 conviction of murderer Jason Van Dyke, who shot Laquan McDonald to death in cold blood. The police union paid for Van Dyke's lawyers, and that failed. After this animal was convicted, the union insisted that he was just doing his job, and they paid for his appeals, which, by the way, have also all failed. In fact, so badly, Van Dyke's own attorney gave up last year, and the murderer has now resigned himself to serving what in reality is a pitifully light sentence. But although Van Dyke has given up any chance of getting out of his, truth be told, light punishment early, his fellow thugs in the Chicago PD haven't given up at all. Now, keep in mind, the murderer Van Dyke was convicted in October 2018. It was only 3 months later, in January 2019, when the Smollett story broke. Now, in the black media, you'll recall we said nothing about it. No Twitter tweets, no video, no nothing. The first reason why was that we saw how eagerly the white media pounced on this with such rapidity. Jussie Smollett is a nobody. Most black people don't know who he is and don't care. Why was the white media all hot and bothered about this and all over it like flies? They didn't react this way to black people being murdered on video by the police. So why were they all eager to jump on this low-interest story, a story for which they had no information? So the white media gave away the game by how eagerly they jumped on this. Obviously, they weren't doing it because they care about black people. It was clear to me, and I'm sure to others, that the white media felt they had information from the very beginning that this was all suspect. They were clearly playing an angle, geared to try to push a counter-narrative. The second reason was Jussie Smollett himself. He had never associated himself with black society in any meaningful way. His statements on the incident were vapid and seemed more about himself than anything else. The words white supremacy never crossed his lips. So you have a little-known actor who chooses to go out at 2 o'clock in the morning, in the middle of the dead night, by himself, ostensibly to get a sandwich. And keep in mind, January 29, 2019, that was the middle of a polar vortex. Chicago was experiencing historically low temperatures. Over a dozen people died from the cold, and this in Chicago, a city famous for its brutally cold winters. But it was particularly horrifyingly cold in January 2019, and this is when Jussie Smollett chooses to go out 2 o'clock a.m., the coldest part of the night. That Subway's wasn't very far from his apartment, and yet at 2 o'clock in the morning, there just so happened to be some MAGA maggots who want to hang out in the middle of a polar vortex. And they just so happen to recognize this virtually unknown actor who most black people don't have a clue who he is, but these two MAGA maggots recognized him somehow. So from the eagerness of the white media to jump on this story, to the person making the claim, to the circumstances under which he said the incident occurred, none of it seemed genuine at all. It seemed like there was astroturf on the part of the alleged victim and certainly on the part of the white media. A lot of angles being played here by a lot of nefarious characters. Now, the Chicago PD has spent decades being immune from punishment, especially when they've harmed black people. The Van Dyke conviction terrified them. They were traumatized by it. White supremacists are always traumatized whenever they take an L. So you better believe that following the Van Dyke conviction, the white supremacist thugs in the Chicago PD were on full alert for any story they could use to get themselves some quickie sympathy. You saw a lot of those stupid stories. Hey, here's some white cop who's playing kickball with some black kids while he's also asking what are your names and your parents' names, where you work at. Those kind of stupid would-be human interest stories fall flat. The public's not fooled. That kind of propaganda doesn't get anything done, doesn't move the needle. What they needed was something that could say, well, these people making these claims of racist attacks, they're lying. And that's what the Smollett incident was tailor-made for. And after the Chicago PD announced that the Smollett attack was staged, They then charged him with 16 counts of disorderly conduct. Now, obviously, you can't fabricate 16 counts of anything out of this. That doesn't make any sense. That is, until I looked at the Laquan McDonald murder. You see, Van Dyke, in addition to the second-degree murder charge that he got convicted for, he was also hit with 16 counts of aggravated assault. That was one count for each bullet that he fired into Laquan McDonald. Now, the court decided that they didn't like those. They said, well, we're putting those aside. But still, that seems to me to be where this 16 counts of disorderly conduct came from. It was the thugs in the Chicago PD calling themselves sending a message. We'll continue with the moment of truth in just a moment, but first, a word from the official sponsor of Black Empowerment, Power Tools. There's no telling when something's going to come up, so make sure you carry your power tools at all times. You never know when you're going to need to bring the hammer down, or when you'll have some trash that needs to be blown away, or some obstacle that requires cutting down. Don't get caught empty-handed. Keep your hammer close by. Keep that leaf blower at the ready, and always carry your steel. Power tools, because no matter what your day job or side hustle may be, there's no excuse for not being ready to put in some work. Now, after these trumped-up charges were put against Smollett, the state's attorney, Kim Foxx, in an uncharacteristic deviation from the norm, actually exercised some common sense and dropped the charges. In other words, she treated this case no differently than if it were anyone else, which is exactly what's supposed to happen. But the Chicago Police Union is desperate for some sort of counter-narrative. So they, with the white media's help, started trying to push the idea that Kim Foxx is wrong for this and something needs to be done. We need a federal investigation. They knew that this was all nothing more than a bunch of nonsense and kicking up noise, but the entire point was this is a racial political exercise. That's what this is about. Sure, it doesn't matter if Jussie Smollett goes to court and the court immediately says, Mr. Smollett, you should apologize. That's not what this is about. This is about a racial proxy war. That's all that's going on here. Now, the thugs in the Chicago PD were trying to get a federal investigation because Trump was president at the time, but the most that they could get for this nothing burger was a judge at the local level who appointed a special prosecutor. And even that is way too much for something as trivial and absolutely meaningless as this. Well, the old adage that you can get a grand jury to indict a ham sandwich certainly proved itself true in this case. All they got on Smollett were 6 charges this time of making a false statement. All of this over an alleged false statement given to one of the most racist and corrupt police departments on the planet, mind you. The charges against Smollett are a total joke. Even if he is convicted, the most that he could get is 3 years, and since this would be his first offense, he'd most likely get probation. So why even do it? It's because the enforcement arm of white supremacy has been exposed and is starting to have something of a threat of being punished. They need to make a big deal of this because they need to prove that they're in charge of something. It was the white supremacist organization, the Chicago Police Union, who were the ones who wanted to use this incident as a proxy war against punishing white supremacists. This entire fraud by the Chicago PD and the white media is nothing more than racial political theater. They need this, and the white media needs it too. After all, they've been the ones who have been taking the police's side for hundreds of years now, and especially in the last 10, as more pressure has been put on the police, the white media's been putting on the cape, telling their lies, smearing and defaming and demonizing the murder victims. So obviously, this has nothing whatsoever to do with any false statements. Police murder citizens every hour of every day. They lie about it and get caught in their lies. But for the few who go on trial, how many times has making a false statement been the main charge or the only charge against them? There are people who make false statements about murders, events where people have been killed, and no prosecutor has spent years and millions of taxpayer dollars trying to lock them up, even for 5 seconds. By the way, if this was really as serious as the white thugs in the Chicago PD are trying to pretend it is, then why is it that when the 2 Nigerian immigrant accomplices to this hoax were caught, they were never charged? Those 2 Nigerians, they said it was all Jussie's idea, and the police let them go without so much as a citation. The white thugs in the Chicago PD are treating this as if it was some sort of mass murder, and yet they let 2 of the accomplices go. So what does that tell you? The citizens of Chicago should be bringing class action lawsuits against the police union for this. and against this so-called special prosecutor. This is a massive waste of taxpayer dollars. And for what? Let's say that Jussie Smollett pleads guilty immediately, so I'll take whatever sentence you got. So the city of Chicago wastes millions and millions of dollars and time that they could spend not investigating other crimes. They instead spend it trying to pursue and promote this racial political exercise because that's clearly what their true job is. It damn sure isn't solving or preventing crime, that's for sure. That brings us to the next important point of this entire fiasco. Jussie Smollett is a gay man. He's part of the LGBT community. So where's GLAAD at? Where's ACT UP at? Where are all the people who you always see telling us how LGBT people are being attacked? Why aren't they advocating for him? Why aren't they sticking up for him? I would say that they abandoned him, but that would be a lie because they were never standing with him to begin with. This is what black people who are into the lifestyle simply refuse to accept. Dave Chappelle was right. Ed Buck is a serial killer and a serial rapist, not to mention a drug dealer. His victims were all gay black men, but the only people who cared about that was black people. Your gay advocates, the usual suspects you see screaming that we need legislation whenever they claim a black person has said something rude to an LGBT person, or who were on a warpath because Dave Chappelle told the truth about how racist that community is. These people have been nowhere to be seen in the Jussie Smollett case or the Ed Buck serial murder rape spree. When they talk about LGBT people being killed, they never mention Ed Buck at all because they don't care about black LGBT people. Where are these groups at to use their money and influence to make the Fraternal Order of Police back off? Jussie's not the right complexion for the protection. He didn't understand that. And truth be told, I think it's doubtful whether he even gets it now. So understand when you're seeing a proxy war taking place. They don't care about Jussie Smollett. They don't care about anything about what he said. They just care about whether or not they can use this as some sort of propaganda win. But when you look at how quiet your so-called black leaders have been about this, when you look at how on code the white media and the white thugs in blue have been about this, and the fact that you have people at the state level, all of this over an alleged so-called false report that was issued, and it's a matter of for something that doesn't even matter. It's not important. They know it's not important. This is about white supremacy showing, well, we can score it or win on you on something. We're trying to salvage something here. That's what this is about. If some idiot tries to claim, well, this guy was stoking racial tension. No, the Chicago PD does that. Jason Van Dyke did that. His fellow conspirators did that, his accomplices. You want to cause racism, make it where white supremacists are able to get away with murder. That causes racial tension. That and nothing else. Anything else is just people who are already angry about nothing and simply looking for something they can use as an excuse to vent their petulant childish rage. Racial tension is caused by white supremacy, full stop. And if you refuse to punish white supremacy, you make the racial tension worse. But they already know that. Oh, and lest I forget, you had Rahm Emanuel. He was doing the pretend phony outrage thing on all this. Same Rahm Emanuel who Joe Biden wants to make an ambassador now. He did as much as anyone to cover up the murder of Laquan McDonald till he got caught. And then even afterwards, well, he was doing the most to make it clear, I don't want to lose those Chicago police thug votes, because he's in there with them. Rahm Emanuel is as racist as Jason Van Dyke, as racist as the Chicago Police Union. He's as racist as any of those white supremacists out there. What's called for here is a class action lawsuit on the part of the people of Chicago. The people of Cook County should be filing a class action lawsuit specifically against the Chicago Police Union. This is an absolute and complete waste of taxpayer dollars that was pushed by them. It will accomplish nothing. It means nothing. This is not something that's going to make the public any safer. It's a racial vanity project by a bunch of white supremacist trash, which is exactly what the Chicago Police Union is. Trash. The public's taxpayer dollars are being squandered and flushed down the toilet at the behest of a bunch of punks in a pigsty, and you got these so-called black political leaders twiddling their thumbs, all of them hoping desperately that maybe, just maybe, if they kiss enough white supremacists behind, maybe they'll get higher office. Your so-called Black leadership in Chicago is nothing more than a whorehouse. They should be the ones leading the charge, making it clear that all the cost that's going along with this, that the issue needs to be dropped. If there was some sort of hoax on the part of Jussie Smollett, nobody really cares at this point. It doesn't mean anything at this point. And by the way, what's the statute of limitations for that kind of thing? The Chicago PD thugs, these white supremacist trash in their police, they know that it's a long shot that Jussie Smollett's going to do any time, but that's not the point. The point is that the white media helps them to push this and publicize it. To them, it's the OJ strategy. We're just going to bring up Jussie Smollett. This is the OJ strategy here. Hey, remember this guy? We know you don't care about him, but we're going to pretend like it's important. Oh, there's been a hoax going on here, all right. But the hoax isn't the one that allegedly took place on January 29th, 2019. The real hoax regarding Jussie Smollett is the one going on right now. Good. Family and fellow soldiers, I'm the professor, and this is the moment of truth. I don't know if you heard, but Dave Chappelle's been canceled. He was canceled by the Alphabet Mafia. First, there were a couple of morons over at Netflix who wanted to make it clear that he was going to feel the wrath. Now, both of these two happen to be transgender, and they called themselves organizing a Netflix employee protest. They were going to put some pain on Netflix and show their displeasure. But according to Netflix, these two didn't stop there. The first one, by the name of B. Paggles Minor, was accused of violating Netflix's computer security in a pathetic attempt to attack the company. This person lost their job for that. Keep in mind, this is a black person who was doing the most to stick up for the LGBT movement. Now, the other person, Tara Field, who dyed their hair purple, tried to barge into a company meeting without permission. This person, who was white, they were allowed to keep their job. And how did they repay Netflix? They filed a labor complaint against the company. Well, a few days ago, Purple Hair was forced to abandon their nuisance suit and resign from the company. These two were indisputably in the wrong, but this was about getting attention. And it's only when they're attacking a black person that we see these LGBT activists getting this outraged. They only do all this extra stuff with us. By the way, the purple-haired person wrote a social media post where they claimed they stood in solidarity with the black LGBT person who got themselves fired. Quote, I made a decision, sink or swim. I was going to walk side by side with B as they had for so many of us while they led the trans ERG. Now keep in mind, this was last month. Pagel was fired last month, but Field was allowed to keep their job. Field didn't resign in protest. Field didn't even take a day off work. Field stayed at Netflix and kept getting a check. So while Pagel was walking to the unemployment line, Field was walking into work. When you play the fool, you lose a lot. Now, if these people were this gung-ho to stick up for black people, willing to perform data breaches, but of course, they're not willing to do these things for black people. They're trying to escape blackness by claiming they have multiple identities. So they make it a point to go over the top with declaring themselves biracial, LGBT, intersectional, non-binary, etc. Scream it loud as you can, stand next to people who are not black, and claim your identity is with them, and the white supremacists will leave you alone, right? It never works, but they keep trying. And if your new friends say that they're mad about something, and it's usually a black person who they're mad at, then this aspiring escapee from blackness will be out front doing the most to prove that they're more angry than their new friends. That's how it always is with these folks you see hanging out with the so-called left or so-called right. If their pals grumble about something, then the aspiring escapee from blackness will be absolutely furious about it. If the white leftist or white right-winger is yelling about something, then the aspiring escapee from blackness will be throwing things, climbing buildings, or the Statue of Liberty, and trying to hack into companies' computers. They want to prove they're more concerned about their white pals' interests than their white pals are. And if that sounds like Malcolm's proverbial house Negro, you're absolutely right. These people can play these games with themselves, but white supremacy isn't fooled. Okay, well, that was the first attempt to cancel Dave Chappelle. Yeah, crash and burn, but you know what? Sometimes you take your shot and you miss, but try again, and sooner or later law of averages will kick in, right? Well, that brings us to the rot. You recall a couple of weeks ago, they were falsely claiming that Chappelle's high school was distancing itself from him. Now, there was absolutely nothing to indicate that they were doing so, but apparently when the school said that they wanted to postpone a fundraiser in regards to the theater that they were going to name after him, that for the rot, oh, look, they're distancing themselves. Okay, maybe they're not, but we're going to say it and hopefully people will believe it. Yeah, anything for clicks, right? Well, that kind of lying backfires on you. Chappelle made an appearance at his old high school last week, and by all accounts, things went off without a hitch. And not only is Chappelle not backing down, he's tripling down. Remember when he said that he wouldn't do any more LGBT material? Well, apparently he changed his mind because in his new comedy show, he tells some trans jokes. And the alphabet is mad. Chappelle even conducted a little Q&A with the kids afterwards, following his appearance at the high school last week. That also went well, with the exception of one or two attention-seeking punks who Chappelle dismissed as immature because that's what a 16-year-old is. You know, young people with chronic behavioral problems really shouldn't be at these kind of group events. Anyway, the white media is on code, and they're just cutting and pasting the same thing. That's what they were doing last week. They can't say that Chappelle's high school appearance was canceled. So they lied and said that the school was distancing itself, but that didn't work. So now what they're saying is, well, he was met with mixed responses. Dave Chappelle is the biggest comedian on the planet right now. Arguably the most relevant entertainment figure on the planet right now. And he goes to his old high school, and people think it's surprising that there's a couple of malcontents among the student body who will do anything for some quickie attention. And we're supposed to take that seriously. And whoever these empty-headed clods were, I guess for them they were swinging for the fences. One of them said that he was a bigot. Now, part of why the white media was mad about what happened last week was because Chappelle deprived them of having any video. They would love to have that kind of thing. He's no fool. Before the function even began, Chappelle required that all of the folks in attendance had to hand over their cell phones before they would be allowed to enter the auditorium. This way, none of these idiots could post videos that the white media would run with. So what they had was basically accounts that were given to them verbally. You have to see it in print because there is no video. Yeah, Dave Chappelle understands the white media. Whenever you got these clowns, these astroturf punks looking for attention, they love the whole thing about video because that gives them something you can show, and the white media can play it and say, see, look, take a look at Chappelle. Obviously, he was devastated. He knew he was caught out. But instead, it's a matter of, nope, you're just getting an account that's sold to you. So you don't have the ability to try to tell people what it is that they're seeing. You don't have anything at all. They're mad. Dave Chappelle has yet again outsmarted a bunch of idiots. He hampered their ability to control the narrative. So yet another attempt by the white media and a bunch of malcontents with mental disorders have failed to take down Dave Chappelle yet again. You would think that they would learn, but the problem that they have is, well, when it comes to a black person, especially a black man who they've decided that they want to attack, well, they never seem able to take a hint. Too bad, because the public simply isn't going to turn against Dave Chappelle. The public's with him. So that's the reason why they wanted video of him at that high school, so they could say, look how he was speaking to a bunch of kids. The kids, think about the children, the kids. That's the angle they were hoping to play, and he deprived them of that, as he should. The school invited him. They didn't invite any of these attention-seeking punks. They invited him to show up. He attended. One or two idiots complained, but in an era where teenagers all have cell phones and a TikTok or Instagram account, it's to be expected that a few of them will do anything just to get someone to acknowledge their meager existence. And the white media will echo the defamatory smears because Chappelle outsmarted them. Again, he beat Viacom by forcing them to surrender their license on his name and to pay him millions of dollars that they owed. And this is supposed to be the white media's revenge, but it just ain't happening. They know it won't matter, but they're furious that this black man has successfully defied them, and they're terrified that he's going to get others to do the same. Now, following Chappelle's appearance at his high school last week, what he did was he posted on Instagram that he was going to be doing a fundraiser for the theater because there were some people who were spreading the rumor that, oh, the school, they're getting cold feet. Maybe they're not going to name it after Chappelle. He said, oh, hell, this is a game of big bank takes a little bank, or in the case of those punks, no bank. So he put up a post saying that he was going to do a fundraiser to raise money for the school, and that he wanted to see if the people who didn't like him, if they would contribute and go ahead and say, I don't like you. And the people who did support him, if they contributed and said, we're contributing because we support you. He said if the people who don't like him, if their contribution is greater than the people who do support him, he said that he would automatically take himself out of the running. He would tell the school, you ain't got to name the school after me. The people have spoken, and they've spoken with their dollars. That wasn't just smart, it was brilliant. Making the statement, this comes down to money. You can complain all you want about what you think you're offended by, but at the end of the day, you can't hurt me because my supporters actually put money behind their words. That's because the alphabet doesn't have any numbers, financially or numerically. And what was the response of Dave's high school to this? They announced that they were going to go forward with renaming the theater after him. They were telling him, you ain't got to worry about doing your fundraiser. You have made it where we have to go ahead and take a side, and we're taking yours. We have to speak up, and we're speaking up for you. Look what Newsweek says. Dave Chappelle's alma mater will still name theater after him, despite Netflix controversy. And that's a doggone loaded headline if there ever was. Getting the point across, they're still going forward with him, despite the fact that this man, he has offended the alphabet. This black man, he needs to bow and scrape and beg, and he won't beg, and the white media can't force him to bend the knee, and he just won't do it. So while the rot is busy putting out phony headlines claiming that Chappelle's high school is distancing itself from them, well, don't look now, rot. But Chappelle's high school is ignoring the punks, and they're standing with Dave Chappelle. You see, it's a coward who decides that they're going to be attacking a black man under white supremacy. Black people, and black men in particular, don't have the power to be calling anybody to account. So everybody figures that black people and black men in specific happen to be easy targets. They're going to be soft targets. And the reason why is you just say this black man here, he's threatening. He threatens everyone. Everyone's threatened by him. Don't you know what danger you're putting? The danger you see. Yeah, they ain't talking that way about Jussie Smollett. Nobody's saying, well, gee, all of this attacking by the media against this gay black man, wow, you guys are really putting the LGBT community at risk. You know, you really shouldn't be punching down like that. Now, they ain't saying that about him. Smollett doesn't have the complexion for the protection, though he might have fooled himself into thinking that he did. But the entire idea about going after Chappelle is a lynching by proxy. Because while there are legitimate instances of anti-LGBT discrimination, or even crimes for that matter, none of these clowns, especially not the white media, are talking about any of them. They're going after Dave Chappelle because it's safe. Ed Buck was murdering LGBT men in Los Angeles, and nobody gave a rip. None of these people who were getting all exercised about Dave Chappelle were saying anything. The same white media that wants to devote headlines to saying he got a mixed reaction when he went to his high school, they weren't saying a damn thing about Ed Buck until black folks put the pressure on to bring this scumbag to account. So no, they don't care about the safety and security of LGBT people, whether they be children, adults, or what have you. The white media don't give a damn. They're just using them as a pretense to do something they wanted to do anyway. Dave Chappelle's been a marked man ever since he went on Oprah and talked about how he refused to wear a dress and explained that these Hollywood producers, these studios, they pressure black people, particularly black men, into doing this emasculating stuff. They pressure you into it. They go, well, you need to do it. We've written the script, and oh God, think about how much money we're going to. They do all that mess to try to pressure you into it. He made it clear, I ain't doing it. You can say whatever the hell you want. Not happening. He was a marked man when he put that business out there. When he's exposed it, he had the guts to actually say that. They decided right then and there, something has to be done about him. They wanted Dave Chappelle to bow down, and he refused to. They've been trying for over 10 years now to find some way. If they couldn't destroy him, can they undermine him? Can they dirty him up, turn the public against him? And it just isn't working. Nothing they're doing is working. He goes to his old high school and he knows, there's probably going to be a couple little troublemakers here who think that they're going to be getting some attention from the white media. Negroes always know what it is that the white supremacists want. Oh, we know what it is that the white supremacists want to see. The fastest, most expedient way to get attention from white mommy and white daddy. So Dave Chappelle was ready for that. He said, before y'all come in this auditorium, you got to drop off all your digital devices. There's no cameras allowed on this one. It just goes to show there is simply no substitute for having a spine. There is simply no substitute for a black man who makes it very clear he is not afraid. There is no substitute for standing on your own 2 feet. There just isn't. So I can only imagine what the right is going to be putting on their front page about this. Dave Chappelle's school caves into hate. Controversy abounds. They're going to be pretending as if they can paint their own reality. If they say to the public, such and such a school has made a controversial decision. Oh, these guys, they're on the wrong side of white supremacy. I mean, of history. They figure if they say that, that's going to suddenly take hold in the public mind. But it won't, because it can't, because it's not reality. These people in the LGBT community attacking Dave Chappelle, that's cowardly. You already know that as a black man, he probably doesn't have the ability to impose consequences on you. Now, you're not doing anything about the white supremacists who actually do commit crimes against LGBT people. You're not doing that. You're not hot and bothered about that. You're not on a crusade about that. You're not mentioning that. Gee, if you didn't know better, you'd swear that they weren't at all. That's a doggone lie. They're the ones who deprive LGBT people of jobs or deprive them of housing or otherwise deprive them of what they think they're supposed to have. There's no black person who can do that because no black person has the power to. But of course, we all know that basically they're allowing themselves to be used as stalking horses for an anti-black agenda. Dave Chappelle stands as a symbol of a black man who defied the white media, and they got to find a way to extract their pound of flesh. They haven't been able to gin up any quickie indictments against him, haven't been able to take the guy into court. But as far as they're concerned, we're going to destroy this guy one way or the other. We'll tell whatever lies we got to tell. We'll put up whatever fraudulent headlines we got to put up. We'll claim his high school is distancing itself, even if it's not. And hopefully if people see this, people are stupid. People are gullible. They'll fall for anything. If they see a headline saying this, if they see a lot of headlines saying why, they'll go for it, and they don't understand. People ain't listening to the white media on this. They're listening to Dave Chappelle on this. He's made it very clear. Twitter is not a real place, and these white media mouthpieces like The Rot are not real news. They just ain't. And as for people who think to themselves that if they just claim that their primary identity is not white, that it's LGBT, that apparently somehow that's going to be a perfect camouflage to use for an anti-black racist attack they're learning now. No, nobody's fooled. And don't get me wrong, I'm not putting Dave Chappelle up for sainthood or anything. I just think the issue is that the fact that he is not backing down and that the white media's lies are being exposed for everyone to see, that is important and it does deserve to be mentioned. A lot of black people, especially black men in entertainment or in sports, which is basically the same thing, they quake in their boots and they tremble with terror at even the prospect that they might have run afoul of the alphabet. Well, Dave Chappelle is demonstrating in real time how you stand up to the alphabet. You do it with math. Good day, and be one.
What are you looking at me for? You don't even want to come to me. Don't be looking at me, baby.